Welcome back to another sci-fi episode where psychology and finances intersect or collide. Welcome back to the Pain Management Clinic. We are here addressing chronic financial pain, where we'll continue to examine how we think, feel, and behave with a financial action plan, and what those barriers are to adhering to that financial action plan, just as you would see in a true chronic physical pain management clinic. So the last time we talked about the 5 common non-adherent behaviors, and make sure you go back and listen to that episode. And we started addressing the first of the 4 barriers to adherence. So one was at least for financial chronic pain, the client-related barrier, not understanding the knowledge deficiencies. And we'll continue with further client-related behaviors in just a moment. But again, I would encourage you to go back and listen to that episode so this makes sense to you. But further, the other barriers within that client-related barrier, not just the knowledge deficiency, not just that financial illiteracy, but also forgetfulness. So when it comes to financial planning as a whole, it seems overwhelming, and I want to validate that for you. I see my clients come in, they're excited about being there. It took them a long time to finally get there. We're talking possibly 2 years of thinking, I need to go see somebody. I need to see somebody. And they finally make the appointment. They finally do the legwork to get the appointment, and then they show up and they're excited about moving forward. And then I see the eyes glaze over as we get into the session, and they're thinking, Olivia, because many times I know what they're thinking because they'll voice it later. I have no idea how to put all of this into practice. Well, they say that before they realize Olivia is going to send you a follow-up email with your action plan that we collaboratively developed, all spelled out for you. But forgetfulness is one of those things that if you don't write down what you're thinking about in that moment that you want to tackle, that you want to bring up in the next session, a lot of times it will escape your brain, escape your mind, and it will never return, no matter how hard you try to retrieve it. And so make sure that you know that from this point forward, when it comes to financial chronic pain and how I'm going to overcome this, any question that I have, any confusion that I have, any clarification that I might need, write it down in that moment and make sure that you are contacting your financial counselor to provide clarity as soon as possible. And that is what is done in a chronic physical pain management clinic. Clarification as soon as possible empowers the patient, just like clarification in the financial counseling world will empower the client. So the busyness of life, maybe even cognitive impairments because of your overstressed world, might lead to missed appointments or even supportive care. But when we're overwhelmed financially, that excess stress and all the excess stress hormones and neurochemicals that come with that truly do impact your cognitive recall and memory recall. The distracted brain is what I call it. It in general makes us vulnerable. And then we miss a deadline, or we miss an assignment, or we miss an opportunity because of that forgetfulness. So that's another client-related barrier. And then you have emotional factors. I'm sure you're quite familiar with this and you need no introduction to this barrier. But let's say if you are physically fatigued, you are usually emotionally fatigued. and vice versa. Your mind, your brain, and your body all work in tandem. So there are mental health conditions, obviously, that I do see, even though I'm not providing clinical therapy. There are folks that are in my office because they do have a mental health diagnosis, let's say of depression or complicated grief or even anxiety. And some are just finding it difficult to do anything, whereas some are finding it difficult to just navigate through all the thoughts and plans that they have for themselves, the distracted brain or even the ADHD brain. So my role is to help move you through that emotional fog and through those brain distractions, to partner with you. We can help get you on board with that financial action plan. And we don't want you to sabotage your relationship with the counselor just because you felt like this was not a good match for you, or your emotions are making the decisions for you, or you are inappropriately sizing someone up. So be aware of those emotional factors, the same factors that could preclude or hinder someone in the physical chronic pain world from receiving adequate treatment. So then there's health literacy. So that in the chronic physical pain world looks like difficulty understanding medical instructions or medical terminology. In the financial world, again, back to the terminology financial literacy, uh, it's folks who aren't understanding financial terms, or they're not understanding financial instructions regarding the action plan. Olivia, I don't know how to call a creditor. Where do I find their contact information? What do you mean set up a repayment plan and a charge off? I thought a charge off meant that it was gone and I didn't have to pay it anymore. Well, not when you have a security clearance. There's still, if there's a balance, there's a balance, and there's the expectation that you will pay off your delinquent debt. Well, what is even delinquent debt? So you could see how terminology can be somewhat confusing for folks. So I always encourage people to write down the questions before your next appointment so that you won't be flooded by thoughts and emotions, so that you can get to that financial literacy and have your brain less distracted and less emotionally laden so that it can receive and absorb that information. And so again, if you hear this term financial literacy, especially as an active duty member, remember that the Department of War's financial literacy training for military personnel is available to you. And quite frankly, I believe that would be a great training for Department of War civilians as well, especially if they're going to be granted a security clearance, because most security clearances are denied or revoked because of financial issues, hands down. Not because of criminal history, but because of financial issues, personal financial issues. That should say a lot. And then the last bit of barrier within that client-centered barrier for adherence to your action plan is cultural or religious beliefs. And this can conflict with your action plan. And with physical pain management, obviously, if you are not wanting to take a specific medication because of side effects, or it doesn't agree with those cultural or religious beliefs, a lot of folks are willing to work with you and look at alternatives. And it's the same with financial counseling. In some cultures, it is the man's role to be the head of households and to provide that financial stability and to make the financial decisions. Now, obviously, I would encourage these couples to work together and not challenge their cultural beliefs or their religious beliefs, but more so, how can you work within that framework to bring more financial stability into the home? But one of the cultural beliefs that truly impact the action plan negatively are when you have several family members who provide antiquated or harmful alternatives to a true bona fide professional. So, for example, I will see so many folks who will say, well, my aunt did it this way, my uncle did it this way, a parishioner in the church did it this way, so I'm going to do it this way. And then when I let them know that they can't do it that way because they have a security clearance, it truly bursts their bubble. And this is where I see grown men cry, grown women cry. I had no idea. They don't know because they don't know. A lot of these aunts, uncles, family members, clergy, other folks within your world don't understand the consequences of delinquent debt if you hold a security clearance. There's a different way that you would have to go about working through this. So then you have an overarching treatment-related barrier where there's complexity within the regimen. So, for example, there are several steps with instructions within your action plan. And it's going to make it feel more complicated than it really is. And you might feel overwhelmed with that. Or you could, depending on your personality, feel comforted by that. It really depends on who you are. And then there are multiple avenues that you could take, but you're not sure of which to take. Or there's this constant awareness that I need to do what is good for me, but then you're not tracking because it is so complex, the action plan. So what a financial counselor will do for you with chronic financial pain is to make sure that we cut the steps down to measurable size so that it feels more doable. And then there are side effects. And again, this is according, treatment-related barriers, action plan-related barriers. It is unpleasant and debilitating sometimes what these side effects are. Just like you would see with chronic physical pain, the side effects of medications, there will be side effects for your financial action plan as well. And any good counselor will tell you that it will get worse before it gets better. And that is true of physical, financial, spiritual, because there's this level of awareness that you start moving towards, and sometimes it's just uncomfortable and sometimes painful to meet those thoughts, to tackle those thoughts. So there will be side effects. There'll be side effects to the actual behaviors of over-indebtedness or side effects of a lack of a spend plan as well. So understanding that those things will be there can help you manage those side effects and before giving up too prematurely. So there are, let's say, high costs. Okay, so within the physical world with chronic pain management, there are high out-of-pocket costs for medications and specialty treatments and specialty care. And you could say the same about the financial world. There can be high out-of-pocket expenses, especially when it comes to illegitimate treatments. So, for example, folks that move toward debt settlement rather than debt consolidation, they think that they're saving money. But if they really knew what the fees were in that contract and the enrolled debts they put in there, versus the amount they're paying down on their debt related to the fees, oh man, I think they wouldn't have ever contracted with that debt settlement company at all. They think they're going to save money, but they actually spend more with those illegitimate treatments. I'm not saying that all debt settlement is illegitimate, but for those with security clearance issues, many of them are going to back out of those anyway, especially when they see the high cost and the low benefit in return. So, if we look at the cost of a certified public accountant, that is a bona fide professional that could cost a good amount of money per year, but you're talking a flat fee, or if there's continued consultation, there's also a flat fee that's associated with that. But when you compare the cost of seeing a true bona fide tax professional versus someone who didn't know what they were doing and the fees associated with that, it would have been much better for you to pay the professional. So, and bankruptcy is also expensive. For some, bankruptcy might be the most attractive for several different reasons, because it would cause less work for you, less elbow grease, so to speak. And perhaps you are able to liquidate some of your assets or your debts or discharge your debts completely. So there's a lot of attractiveness in moving towards bankruptcy. But when I work with clients and we look at the total number of what debts could truly be rolled into a bankruptcy or discharged in a bankruptcy, many times it's as small as a car payment or a car. Like 50 grand is all that a bankruptcy would be able to take care of it. That brings it to a more measurable size. Like, wow, okay, then bankruptcy may not be my only option. I could actually make a car payment and pay off the debt without a bankruptcy. And then let's not forget the high cost, the high emotional and intellectual cost of going through this process. It takes so much energy, especially the initial energy costs are high. And then another treatment-related barrier or action plan barrier is the lack of immediate benefit. Oh, I feel for you. I feel for my clients. This reduces motivation because in the initial financial counseling session, you have this initial euphoria from the high expectations for your future, which is great. But then that wears off steadily, and then you're thinking, oh, I don't even see the benefit, Olivia, of moving forward with this. And we become so short-sighted that we lose hope and we don't persevere, and then we can't see the long-term gain or benefit from there. And then there's another barrier. It's condition-related barriers. So think of whatever your financial condition is, your chronic financial condition. And remember, looking back at what we discussed in that very first episode as it relates to chronic financial pain, three financial behaviors, poor budgeting, high credit use, and financial inactivity or avoidance that lead to 4 chronic financial conditions: debtflammation, depression, financial instability, financial anxiety, or even financial sclerosis, if you want to call it that, that results in premature retirement, delayed retirement, or even premature death of your financial sovereignty. So let's name that financial condition, whatever that is. Think of it in your mind. I'll give you just a moment to get there. So the barriers that are associated with the condition-related barrier are asymptomatic conditions. And that's where you know you have a financial condition, but you don't feel sick. So you don't feel the need for financial treatment. It's kind of like a patient who is diagnosed for the first time with perhaps type 2 diabetes. I don't feel sick, so I don't feel the need to change my diet or change my behaviors. And in the financial world, if you are asymptomatic, and asymptomatic is just a fancy word for symptoms are not presenting at that moment, you're not motivated to do anything different. But the overspending consequences will not be felt immediately. And sometimes those consequences may not be realized for over a year, where carrying the monthly deficit to a credit card eventually mounds, and the minimum monthly due steadily grows. Then you're 30, 60, 90, and now 180 days delinquent. Now you're starting to feel sick. Now you see the symptoms, you feel the symptoms. And within 3 to 6 months, you're sitting in front of your security manager explaining what happened. And suddenly, the thought that I could lose my job because I could lose my security clearance hits you. And now there's motivation to do something. So we want to catch this financial condition before it leads to symptoms, before it builds to a chronic condition that will lead to delaying retirement. That's one of the bigger things I see. Olivia, I could have retired 3 years ago, but because I never set financial boundaries with my grown children, I'm still paying for their rent. I'm still paying for their car, their cell phones, their car insurance. I'm paying their student loans. And you can see the chronicity, the instability within that financial condition. And then there are comorbidities where you're managing multiple chronic conditions with that chronic condition. So whether it's physical or further financial conditions, you can see the difficulty that could be relayed here. So remember that stat, 60% of Americans have one chronic condition and 40% have two chronic conditions. So looking at the example we just examined above with the security clearance, while asymptomatic, another chronic condition developed, then another. The overspending led to a monthly deficit, which led to overindebtedness, which led to delinquent debt, which led to poor credit, which led to a security clearance scrutiny, which led to acute stress, which led to physiological and psychological symptoms that compounded over time. And now you have high blood pressure. And with high blood pressure, if untreated, now you have gastrointestinal distress. And now you're moving towards heart disease or other heart-related conditions. What began as a preventable behavior snowballed into chronic, debilitating symptoms. And it is my passion to help you move towards well-being rather than illness. So within the condition-related barrier, there's also physical limitations where pain, fatigue, or immobility keep you. I had a dear widow who would come in regularly, and I just, my heart goes out to her. She had a chronic pain within her hip and used a walker, and very difficult to get in and out of her vehicle, and lived alone. And so that immobility in many ways kept her from receiving a lot of the financial care that she needed. And that can just keep folks from moving forward. And I hate that. So acute stress even can paralyze, limiting your movement. And again, the amount of energy needed to tackle these complex steps is tremendous when viewed overall. But like with behavioral activation, you can take life by the cinch let me go back. You can take life by the inch where it's a cinch, or take it by the yard where it's hard. And then, of course, there are system-related barriers where there's poor client-provider communication, if you have a lack of trust or understanding with your provider, that could cause some issues, or fragmented care or lack of coordination, that could cause issues, or even access to care. For folks that might be listening, oh, Olivia, I wish I were a Team Redstone member so I could get the free financial counseling that you provide. Well, don't give up too easily. There are so many resources that are probably available to you still, especially through your bank. Many financial institutions offer free financial education. And sometimes that's what we need to get us back on track. But again, be aware that they may try to sell you products that are inconsistent with your needs. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to agree to anything. You just say you want the financial education. And I recently listened to one offered by a credit union at Rock Island Arsenal, and it was very, very good, climbing out of debt. And it was clear that he knew his audience, a federal employee audience, and did not offer solutions to debt that would further endanger them, especially with security clearances. So these folks many times know what they're doing, but buyer beware, consumer beware. You can look up folks, you can look up financial institutions on the Better Business Bureau website, see what their ratings are. I mean, you can make yourself feel better about the education that you're receiving. But my recommendation, just like a chronic physical pain management patient, don't Dr. Google. Don't go and diagnose yourself online with whatever financial ailments you have. Please see a financial professional. Because if you Google or look up YouTube videos on how to fix your credit, you might find some that are absolutely true and trustworthy, but we don't know which ones those are. You don't know which ones those are. So again, consumer beware. All right, so I will end this discussion by getting you excited just a little bit about how to address the adherence issues. There might be a barrier that you find more challenging than the other. So if you, by the way, there's a stat out there that care coordination and follow-up decreases non-adherence by 20 to 30% in the pain management field. So even if you followed up with your financial professional and you did a little care coordination between your tax planner and your financial educator, and you had those two talking together, or at least you ask those coordinated questions on how they relate to each other, you can reduce your non-adherence just by 20 to 30%. So the other thing that could help is motivational interviewing, just to kind of give you an idea of how we make decisions and how we move from being amotivated to motivated. Did you know that there are stages of change? And in motivational interviewing, they name those stages the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, and action phase. But in motivational interviewing, they also explore ambivalence, elicit change talk, and address barriers or loss of momentum. Why do I keep moving back instead of moving forward? And you don't have to understand why. We don't have to understand the root causes to move forward. That is not necessary. And you will find, even in the clinical physical realm, that is also not true. You don't have to understand the root cause to feel better or to decrease your suffering. It's all related to self-management, self-efficacy, and perhaps along the way of incorporating that, root cause will present itself. But you don't have to know that right away to move forward. So change talk. I love this term. It's called preparatory change talk, where we have to prepare ourselves, even in our own minds, and contemplate and be like Winnie the Pooh. Think, before we even make a movement, before we even move that chess piece, before we even discover what it is that we want to do about our finances. Let me validate that that is a true thing. You are not alone in that. So this is where you weigh the costs and benefits of whether making this change is worth it. That is a true phenomenon. I think it's funny. But I also understand how sad it is when it is debilitating someone or paralyzing or crippling someone from making that first step. And there's this thing called reactance theory, where we assert our independence or react when we feel our freedom is taken away. And this is exactly what I see in the financial counseling session. We go through the cash flow analysis, and then from there we start creating the spend plan. And you see the folks like, I thought I was okay. I thought I was excited about being here. But now I'm thinking, Olivia, like, you're really putting me on a diet here. Oh, no, Olivia's not doing anything. Olivia's not making any of these decisions for you. This is all self-determined choice. But this is the framework that you have. This is where you are. This is what you have to work with. And we work within those constraints. Olivia didn't make those decisions of over-indebtedness 6 months ago. This is the position you've put yourself in, but how can you move out of this position? And it is always possible. Okay, but what happens is you start to rebel in the session, and know that that is normal. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It doesn't break my confidence. I know this as a trained professional that you are going to rebel. You're going to react, and when you feel like your freedoms are being taken away. But let me normalize relapse or the potential for relapse. It helps you understand the ups and downs with creating lasting change. You'll move back and forth between these stages of change, between pre-contemplation and contemplation. And that's actually where reactance theory is within the pre-contemplation and contemplation. And then the preparation, and the action. You'll move back and forth between those. And sometimes there's a readiness to change in some areas and a reactance to change in other areas. So there will be setbacks, and setbacks are learning opportunities and stepping stones and an essential part of change and your action plan. But the best thing that we can do is simplify. To increase adherence to your treatment plan or to your financial action plan. Most financial management practice is self-monitoring. So you can start small, paper and pencil, and then start leveraging technology that is free. We don't want you to pay for something else that you don't need. And then reminders. If you set reminders, if you have a calendar or even use your phone as a calendar, setting those reminders can decrease. Setting those reminders in your calendar can decrease your no-show rates, not showing up for appointments or not showing up for yourself, by 30 to 50%. I hope this has been helpful for you. If anything, validating that you're not alone in all the craziness and weird thoughts you have as you move towards a financial action plan. So be sure to join us for our next financial pain management clinic on positive psychology and the concept of flourishing. And remember to rate and review the pod wherever you listen.